My sister has been faking epilepsy for 10 years after fainting, once at a school dance, using Alka-Seltzer tablets to foam at the mouth while stealing my college fund and getting me fired by claiming I triggered her seizures. When she tried to defraud a federal building and got me arrested for conspiracy, my friend whose daughter has real epilepsy hooked her to an EEG machine that proved she was faking, so she drained our parents' retirement savings and had me evicted while mom found practice videos labeled Grand Mal version 3 on her tablet. My older sister Lauren has been milking a minor fainting spell from 10 years ago since the day it happened. She was 16, got dehydrated at a school dance, passed out for 30 seconds, and got a precautionary ER visit. But if she told you the story, she'd say she barely survived a grand mal seizure that left her with severe, life-threatening epilepsy, and she would weaponize that condition, like a loaded GN. At first, she'd just be annoying but tolerable about it, like when she stole my college fund to go on a shopping spree in Miami. When Dad found the credit card statements, she collapsed. Giselle, me, used the strobe light on her phone. It triggered a seizure, and I had postictal confusion. I didn't know what I was doing. I lost my scholarship opportunity. At 22, Lauren got caught embezzling from her receptionist job at the medical clinic. Her defense was that I'd been deliberately triggering her seizures by taking flash photography, causing episodes where she wasn't conscious of her actions. The clinic dropped charges to avoid discriminating against an employee with a disability. I got fired from my job there too. When Lauren totaled mom's car driving hammered, she told the police that I triggered a seizure by playing video games with flashing lights, and she'd hammered alcohol to self-medicate the resulting anxiety. The officer's own son had epilepsy, so he let her off with a warning. I got stuck with increased insurance rates as a listed driver. Last year, Lauren got caught dealing pills she'd stolen from the clinic's pharmacy. She told investigators I was the real dealer who exploited her neurological vulnerability, knowing her seizure medications made her confused and easy to manipulate. The detective bought it completely. Each performance followed the same pattern: Lauren's violent convulsions, Lauren's eyes rolling back, Lauren's medical alert bracelet, and fake neurologist reports. She made a mockery of people with real epilepsy, but I never retaliated because illness is illness, until she crossed the line. Lauren discovered she could make serious money through disability fraud, faking seizures at businesses and threatening ADA lawsuits. She hit 3 stores in 1 month, each time claiming their lighting or security systems triggered life-threatening episodes. She decided to go big and targeted a federal building, collapsing in the lobby, thrashing violently and foaming at the mouth, Alka-Seltzer tablets. But security footage showed her carefully placing padding under her head before the seizure began. When investigators came knocking, Lauren's response was immediate. My sister has been documenting my seizures to sue for millions. She coaches me on how to make them look worse. Check her computer. She researched all these federal buildings. She showed them texts taken out of context, twisted my neuroscience coursework into fraud planning. No witnesses to our actual conversations. Lauren had planted seizure trigger videos in my search history, and somehow my research on epilepsy looked suspicious. The investigators bought it, a disabled woman exploited by her predatory younger sister. I was arrested on federal charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, ADA violations. 6 months in federal detention gave me time to study Lauren properly, not emotionally but analytically. Her patterns, her greed, her desperate need for sympathy and special treatment. I realized Lauren's weakness wasn't consequences. It was losing her victim status. That's when I reached out to my friend from college, James, who worked as a neurological technician. James's daughter had real epilepsy, and he'd spent years fighting for proper accommodations while watching fakers drain resources. When I explained my plan, he jumped at the chance. Let's expose this parasite, he said. We mapped out everything: how he'd infiltrate her support group, how he'd become the fellow epileptic of her dreams, how he'd document her fraud properly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. James played it flawlessly. He showed up at her epilepsy support group with anti-seizure medications, shared a fake story about developing seizures after a head injury. Lauren latched onto him immediately. Within weeks, she was bragging to him about her schemes, how she'd turned one little fainting spell into a gold mine. James suggested they could work together, maybe hit a casino next, bigger payout potential. But James had a different plan entirely. He convinced Lauren to let him monitor her seizures with professional EEG equipment he'd borrowed from work for their protection in lawsuits. She agreed eagerly, not knowing that EEG readings can definitively prove whether someone is having a real seizure or faking. The night before their casino con, Lauren got hammered and demonstrated her most dramatic seizure yet while hooked to James's equipment. The EEG showed completely normal brain activity throughout her violent thrashing performance. The next day, Lauren put on her Oscar-worthy performance at the casino, convulsing on the marble floor, bite stick and all. But James had already submitted the EEG evidence to federal prosecutors that morning, along with video of her practicing different seizure types. As security surrounded her, federal agents walked in with warrants. James leaned down and said simply, "Giselle wanted you to know that real seizures don't come with rehearsals." Lauren's medical evidence got me released immediately, but that didn't mean I was safe, because Lauren had one last trick up her sleeve. She'd posted bail within hours of her arrest, and I knew that meant trouble. Lauren never went down without dragging someone with her, preferably me. The first sign came 3 days later. Mom called while I was at James's apartment, reviewing the evidence files. Her voice sounded strained, careful. She asked if I could come by the house to discuss something important about the family finances. When I arrived, both my parents sat at the dining room table with papers spread everywhere: bank statements, investment documents, even the deed to the house. Dad's face looked drawn and tired. He pushed a document across the table toward me. It was a power of attorney form, dated 2 years ago, giving Lauren full control over their finances in case of medical emergency. Mom's hands shook as she explained that Lauren had convinced them to sign it during one of her fake hospital stays, claiming she needed someone who understood her condition to make decisions if she became incapacitated. The real problem became clear when Dad showed me their latest bank statements. Over $30,000 had been withdrawn in the past week. Lauren had cleaned out their retirement savings, claiming she needed it for legal fees and medical expenses related to her arrest. She'd told them I had orchestrated everything, that James was my boyfriend who I'd manipulated into helping frame her. I tried explaining the truth, showing them the EEG evidence on my phone, but Mom just looked more confused. Lauren had already been there, crying about how I'd always been jealous of the attention her disability brought. She'd shown them edited versions of our text conversations, making it look like I'd been planning this for years. The worst part came when Dad mentioned the house. Lauren had started the paperwork to take out a home equity loan, claiming she needed it to pay restitution to all the businesses she'd defrauded because of my manipulation. If my parents didn't help her, she'd threatened to tell everyone they'd been complicit in my schemes against their disabled daughter. I left their house feeling sick. James met me at a coffee shop downtown, and I could see the concern on his face immediately. He'd gotten strange calls at work, someone asking questions about whether he'd really borrowed that EEG equipment legitimately. His supervisor had already scheduled a meeting for Monday. We spent the next hour strategizing. Lauren was attacking on multiple fronts, trying to destroy my credibility while draining my parents' resources. James suggested we go to the FBI with everything, but I knew that would take too long. Lauren would have destroyed our lives by then. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Lauren had played victim, how she'd perfected the art of manipulation, but this felt different, desperate. She wasn't just trying to avoid consequences anymore, she wanted to burn everything down. The next morning brought a new crisis. My college called, informing me that someone had reported concerns about my mental stability and history of exploiting disabled individuals. They were placing a hold on my transcripts pending investigation. Without those transcripts, I couldn't apply to graduate programs or transfer my credits. James texted that his daughter's school had called him. Someone had anonymously reported that he was using stolen medical equipment to conduct illegal experiments. Child Protective Services would be conducting a home visit. I met James at his house to help him prepare. We went through everything, making sure all his equipment was properly documented. All his daughter's medical records were organized. His daughter, only 8 years old, asked why everyone was so worried. James just hugged her tighter. While we sorted papers, James's phone rang. His ex-wife, furious. She'd received an anonymous letter detailing how James was endangering their daughter by bringing stolen medical equipment home, how he was involved with a woman who exploited disabled people. She was calling her lawyer about emergency custody. The pattern was clear. Lauren was systematically attacking everyone who'd helped expose her, but she was being smart about it, using systems designed to protect vulnerable people as weapons. Every agency had to investigate, had to take claims seriously. That afternoon, I discovered Lauren's next move. A process server showed up at my apartment with papers. There's something oddly systematic about how Lauren operates, like she's following some kind of twisted playbook, where medical conditions become tools for manipulation. Lauren was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming my actions had worsened her legitimate medical condition. The lawsuit demanded $100,000 in damages. I called the lawyer who'd helped with my federal case, but he explained that civil suits were different. I'd need to hire a civil attorney, pay a retainer I didn't have. Meanwhile, Lauren could drag this out for months, bleeding me dry with legal fees. James arrived at my apartment that evening with his own stack of papers. His employer had placed him on administrative leave pending investigation of the equipment issue. No pay. His ex-wife had filed for emergency custody, citing his involvement in fraudulent medical testing. We sat on my couch, surrounded by legal documents and threatening letters. Everything we'd built to expose Lauren was being turned against us. She'd found our pressure points and was squeezing hard. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo of my parents' house with a for sale sign photoshopped onto the lawn. The message read, "This could all stop. Just admit what you did to me." I showed James the message. He pulled out his phone, showing me a similar text with a photo of his daughter at school. "She's watching us," he said quietly, documenting where we go, who we care about. The next few days blurred together. More calls from agencies, more papers served, more family members turned against me. My aunt called to say she was disgusted by how I'd treated my disabled sister. My cousin unfriended me on social media after Lauren posted a tearful video about her struggles. James's situation worsened faster than mine. The custody hearing was expedited due to the safety concerns. His ex-wife's lawyer painted him as an unstable man who'd stolen medical equipment to help his girlfriend frame an innocent disabled woman. The judge granted temporary custody to his ex-wife. I watched James break down in his car after the hearing. His daughter was everything to him. He'd spent years fighting for equal custody, proving himself as a capable single father despite his ex-wife's accusations. Now Lauren had handed his ex-wife the ammunition she'd always wanted. That night, I found myself parked outside my parents' house. Through the window, I could see Lauren sitting with them at the dinner table. She was crying, probably spinning more lies about my cruelty. Mom rubbed her back while Dad looked through more financial documents. My phone rang. James, his voice hollow. His ex-wife had agreed to drop the emergency custody petition if he signed an affidavit stating he'd been manipulated by me into helping frame Lauren. If he didn't sign, she'd push for permanent sole custody. I told him to sign it. His daughter came first, always. He protested, but I insisted. Lauren had found his weakness and exploited it perfectly. There was no fighting that kind of leverage. The next morning, I woke to find an eviction notice on my door. My landlord had received multiple complaints about illegal medical equipment and fraudulent activities in my apartment. I had 30 days to vacate. Everything was falling apart. Lauren had orchestrated a perfect storm of bureaucratic harassment, family manipulation, and legal threats. She'd turned my support system against me, isolated me, and attacked from every angle. But as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by legal notices and threatening letters, I realized something. Lauren's new strategy revealed her desperate desperation. She wasn't trying to maintain her victim facade anymore. She was going scorched earth. That meant she was scared. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list. Every agency she'd contacted, every lie she'd told, every document she'd forged. Lauren might be good at manipulation, but she'd left a trail. Phone records, emails, timestamps. In her desperation to destroy me, she'd gotten sloppy. James texted that night. He'd signed the affidavit, but made copies of everything first. His ex-wife had already backed off the custody threat, satisfied with her victory. Now he wanted to help me fight back, even if it had to be quietly. We had work to do. Lauren thought she'd won by turning everyone against me, but she'd also shown her hand. Every false report, every forged document, every manipulative sob story, we'd document it all. This time, we'd be ready for her final move. Because if I'd learned anything from 6 months in federal detention, it was patience. Lauren was burning through her options, making enemies of agencies meant to help real victims. Soon, she'd run out of moves, and when she did, we'd be waiting. I spent the following morning at the library, using their computers to avoid any tracking on my devices. Lauren had taught me the value of documentation, though she'd never expected me to use it against her. I created spreadsheets tracking every false report she'd filed, cross-referencing dates with her social media posts where she'd accidentally contradicted her own timeline. In one post from last Tuesday, she'd bragged about a spa day while supposedly bedridden from a severe seizure I'd allegedly triggered. James worked from his end, quietly reaching out to other members of Lauren's support group. 3 people agreed to meet him privately. They'd grown suspicious of Lauren's stories, especially after witnessing her miraculous recoveries whenever money was involved. One woman, whose son had died from SUDEP complications, felt particularly betrayed by Lauren's theatrical performances. My first real break came through an unexpected source. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. M. Kim, knocked on my door with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. She'd overheard Lauren bragging on the phone about her schemes while visiting our parents. Mrs. Kim had been recording birds in her backyard and accidentally captured Lauren's conversation through the open window. The audio was clear enough to hear Lauren laughing about fooling another bleeding heart agency. I made copies of the recording immediately, storing them in multiple locations. James suggested we start building a timeline, something concrete to counter Lauren's web of lies. We met at a small diner outside town, away from prying eyes, and spent hours organizing evidence into a coherent narrative. Lauren's next attack came through my employer. My boss called me into his office, looking uncomfortable. Someone had sent an anonymous tip claiming I'd been using company computers to research disability fraud schemes. They'd attached screenshots of searches that I'd never made, time-stamped during hours when I'd been in meetings with multiple witnesses. My boss believed me, but corporate policy required an investigation. I was placed on unpaid administrative leave. Without income and facing eviction, I moved in temporarily with James. His ex-wife had returned their daughter after he'd signed the affidavit, but the damage to his reputation lingered. We converted his garage into a makeshift office, covering the walls with timelines, evidence charts, and connection maps showing Lauren's pattern of manipulation. The breakthrough came when James remembered something. Lauren had mentioned a storage unit during one of her drunken brags at the support group. She'd said something about keeping her insurance policy there. We spent days checking storage facilities within a reasonable distance, looking for units rented under Lauren's name or our parents' names. We found it at the 4th facility. The manager couldn't give us access, but he mentioned that the unit had been rented 2 years ago, paid annually in cash. The timing matched when Lauren had started her major fraud schemes. We added this information to our growing file. Lauren escalated again. This time, she targeted my few remaining friends. Sarah, my roommate from college, called in tears. She'd received a letter from a lawyer threatening to sue her for participating in my alleged conspiracy against Lauren. The letter claimed Sarah had helped me research seizure triggers and plan psychological torture. Sarah had a new baby and couldn't afford legal trouble. She apologetically cut contact. My parents' situation worsened. Dad called from a hotel, his voice shaking. Lauren had convinced Mom that I'd been poisoning them slowly, making them more susceptible to manipulation. She'd shown Mom fake medical articles about heavy metal poisoning and its effects on judgment. Mom had demanded Dad choose between supporting Lauren or leaving the house. He'd chosen to leave, but most of their joint assets were already under Lauren's control. I met Dad at the hotel. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. He handed me a folder containing copies of all the financial documents he'd managed to save. The damage was extensive. Lauren had liquidated their retirement accounts, taken out credit cards in their names, and was working on a reverse mortgage, all perfectly legal with that power of attorney. James discovered something interesting while reviewing the support group's social media page. Lauren had been posting increasingly erratic messages, accusing various members of spying on her and sabotaging her medical equipment. The group administrator had started deleting her posts and warning her about her behavior. Her carefully maintained victim persona was cracking. We decided to use Lauren's paranoia against her. James posted innocuously in the support group about a new neurologist in town who specialized in difficult cases. He mentioned that this doctor used advanced testing that could definitively diagnose even the most complex seizure disorders. Within hours, Lauren had private messaged him, demanding details. The trap required careful planning. We couldn't impersonate a doctor, but we could create a situation where Lauren would expose herself. James told her about a research study seeking people with documented seizure disorders. The compensation was substantial, but participants had to undergo comprehensive testing. How does Lauren keep track of all these lies she's telling different people? The way she sent that photo of James's daughter at school makes me wonder how long she's been planning each attack on them. Lauren immediately expressed interest. I spent my days documenting everything while fighting the various battles Lauren had created. The college investigation moved slowly, but I provided them with evidence showing I'd been in class during the supposed search times. My landlord agreed to extend extend my move-out date after I explained the situation and showed him the false complaints. Lauren's attacks became more frantic. She filed complaints with the medical board about James, claiming he'd stolen equipment and conducted illegal experiments. She told Adult Protective Services that I was elder abusing our parents by turning them against their disabled daughter. She even contacted my high school, trying to get my diploma revoked based on alleged cheating that never happened. Each attack required a response, documentation, and energy I barely had. But I noticed something important. Lauren was making mistakes. Her stories contradicted each other. She claimed to be bedridden from seizures on days when security cameras showed her shopping. She filed reports from locations she supposedly couldn't travel to due to her disability. James and I created a master document comparing all of Lauren's claims. The contradictions were staggering. She'd reported over 40 seizures in the past month, but had been photographed at social events during most of them. Her medical claims varied wildly depending on her audience. To disability services, she had photosensitive epilepsy. To our parents, she had stress-induced seizures. To the support group, she had rare genetic epilepsy. The storage unit became our focus. We couldn't access it legally, but we could watch it. James set up a wildlife camera in the woods behind the facility, perfectly legal and ostensibly for his nature photography hobby. We waited. Lauren visited the unit at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. The camera captured her loading boxes into her car, looking constantly over her shoulder. She appeared completely healthy, lifting heavy boxes without assistance. No sign of the mobility issues she'd claimed in her latest disability application. We followed up the next day, casually chatting with the facility manager. He mentioned that the tenant had cleared out the unit completely, ending the rental agreement. Whatever Lauren had been hiding, she'd moved it. The pressure was affecting everyone. James's daughter had started having nightmares about losing her dad. My dad was living in a hotel, watching his life savings disappear. Mom had isolated herself, refusing to talk to anyone but Lauren. I'd lost my job, my apartment, and most of my friends. But Lauren was cracking too. Her support group posts became increasingly hostile. She accused members of stalking her, hacking her accounts, and conspiring against her. The administrator finally removed her from the group after she threatened to sue everyone for discrimination. That's when Lauren made her biggest mistake. In her paranoia, she reached out to a journalist, claiming to be a victim of a massive conspiracy involving corrupt medical professionals, family members, and disability advocates. She provided the journalist with documents, recordings, and evidence of her persecution. The journalist, intrigued, started investigating, but instead of finding evidence of a conspiracy against Lauren, she found the trail of Lauren's lies. She reached out to the businesses Lauren had targeted, the agencies she'd defrauded, and the people she'd hurt. The pattern became undeniable. James and I knew we had to act carefully. We couldn't approach the journalist directly without looking like we were part of the conspiracy Lauren claimed. Instead, we made sure our evidence was discoverable. We posted public records requests for documents related to Lauren's claims. We left reviews for businesses mentioning our positive experiences with their disability accommodations. We created a paper trail that any investigator would find. Lauren's response was predictable but desperate. She called me, breaking months of communicating only through lawyers and threats. She was crying, begging, then threatening, then crying again. She said she'd return the money if I called off the journalist. When I explained I hadn't contacted any journalist, she became enraged, accusing me of playing games. I recorded the call legally, adding it to our evidence collection. Lauren's admission about returning money was particularly damning. She'd maintained for months that she'd never taken anything, that I'd orchestrated everything. The journalist published a preliminary article about disability fraud, using anonymous examples. Though Lauren wasn't named, the details were unmistakable to anyone who knew the situation. The article sparked discussions in online forums, with real epilepsy patients expressing anger about people who faked their condition. Lauren panicked. She showed up at James's house at midnight, pounding on the door and screaming about lawsuits and conspiracies. James called the police for a wellness check, genuinely concerned about her mental state. The officers found her agitated but coherent, warning her about trespassing and disturbing the peace. The next morning, Lauren did something unexpected. She checked herself into a psychiatric facility, claiming the stress of persecution had triggered a mental health crisis. It was a clever move. As an inpatient, she was protected from legal service and could claim any of her actions resulted from mental illness. But her 3-day hold gave us crucial time. Without Lauren actively sabotaging us, I could focus on rebuilding. My employer completed their investigation, finding no evidence of wrongdoing. They offered me my job back with back pay. My landlord, impressed by my honesty, offered to rent me a better unit in his building. James's situation improved too. His supervisor, after reviewing all the evidence, cleared him of any equipment misuse. The false reports had actually highlighted his meticulous record-keeping and professional standards. He received a commendation for his handling of sensitive equipment. Dad used Lauren's absence to access their bank accounts, discovering the full extent of the damage. While he couldn't reverse the power of attorney immediately, he could document every transaction. He found receipts for luxury items, casino charges, and cash withdrawals totaling over $50,000. On her release, Lauren found her world shrinking. The support group had banned her. The journalist was preparing a fuller investigation. Her former victims were comparing notes. Most importantly, Mom had started questioning the inconsistencies in Lauren's stories. Lauren's final desperate move was to claim I'd hacked her accounts and created all the evidence against her. She filed a police report, demanding a cybercrime investigation. The detective assigned to the case was thorough, examining all the digital evidence. What he found wasn't hacking, but Lauren's own digital footprint, showing her creating fake documents and editing photos. James and I watched from a distance as Lauren's house of cards collapsed. We didn't need to attack or scheme. We just had to document the truth and let Lauren's lies catch up with her. Every agency she'd weaponized was now examining her claims more carefully. Every person she'd manipulated was seeing the pattern. The turning point came when Mom found Lauren's practice videos, videos. While helping Lauren move some boxes, Mom discovered an old tablet containing dozens of videos of Lauren practicing different types of seizures. Each video was labeled Grand Mal version 3, Absent Seizure Test, Focal Aware Practice. The timestamps went back years. Mom called me for the first time in months, her voice broken. She asked to see the EEG evidence, the timeline we'd created, everything we'd documented. I met her at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant where we could talk without interruption. I showed her everything methodically without anger or accusation. The evidence spoke for itself. Mom aged before my eyes as she realized how thoroughly she'd been deceived. She asked why I hadn't fought back harder earlier. I explained that Lauren had made me the villain so effectively that any defense looked like an attack on a disabled person. Mom returned home and confronted Lauren with the practice videos. Lauren's response was to accuse Mom of violating her privacy and threatening her recovery, but the damage was done. Mom had seen behind the curtain, and there was no going back. Lauren made one last attempt to salvage her scheme. She announced on social media that she was pursuing experimental treatment abroad for her severe epilepsy. She created a crowdfunding campaign, complete with tearful videos about her struggle and the persecution she'd faced from family members who didn't understand her condition. But the internet has a long memory. People who'd followed the journalist's investigation recognized the details. Comments started appearing, questioning her claims and linking to evidence of her fraud. The campaign was reported and shut down within days. As I write this, Lauren is still free but isolated. The various agencies are slowly processing the reports of fraud, but these things take time. Mom and Dad are in counseling, trying to rebuild their marriage and their finances. James has full custody of his daughter again, his ex-wife having realized she'd been manipulated. I'm back at work, living in my new apartment, slowly rebuilding the life Lauren tried to destroy. The experience taught me valuable lessons about documentation, patience, and the power of truth over lies. Lauren thought she could maintain her victim narrative forever, but reality has a way of asserting itself. The storage unit mystery was solved when Dad found the rental agreement in Lauren's papers. She'd been keeping her props there: medical alert bracelets in various styles, fake hospital bands, bottles designed to look like medication, and notebooks full of symptom research. Her insurance policy was evidence of her own fraud, kept in case she needed to blame someone else. Lauren practicing seizures on video and labeling them like Grand Mal version 3 tells me she's been planning this for years. That's not someone having a crisis, that's someone running a business. Lauren still posts occasionally on social media, maintaining her story to a dwindling audience. But the people who matter know the truth now. The family members she turned against me have apologized. The friends who cut contact have reached out. The agencies that investigated me have closed their cases. Justice doesn't always come in dramatic courtroom moments. Sometimes it arrives slowly, through patient documentation and careful truth-telling. Lauren created an elaborate fiction that required constant maintenance and increasingly desperate measures to sustain. The truth simply had to exist, waiting for people to find it. James and I still meet weekly, no longer to strategize but to decompress. His daughter is thriving, getting the real medical support she needs without the shadow of Lauren's fake advocacy. My relationship with my parents is slowly healing, built on a foundation of truth rather than manipulation. Lauren's greatest weapon was always other people's compassion and desire to help someone they believed was suffering. She exploited every system designed to protect vulnerable people, making it harder for those with real disabilities to get support. The ripple effects of her actions spread far beyond our family, but truth has ripple effects too. Each person who learned about Lauren's deception became more aware, more careful, but also more appreciative of genuine struggles. The support group implemented better verification procedures. The agencies developed more sophisticated detection methods. Some good came from the pain. I keep all the evidence in a secure location, just in case. Lauren is nothing if not persistent, and I've learned to stay prepared. But I no longer live in fear of her next attack. She burned through her credibility, her resources, and her enablers. The victim card only works when people believe you're a victim. The experience changed me profoundly. I'm less trusting, but more documenting. I understand how systems can be exploited and how truth can be twisted, but I also learned that patient, methodical resistance can overcome even the most elaborate deceptions. Lauren wanted to destroy me for exposing her fraud. Instead, she exposed herself through her desperate attempts at revenge. Every false report, every manipulated family member, every forged document added to the evidence against her. She created the very trail that led to her downfall. As this chapter closes, I'm focused on moving forward. The past can't be changed, but the future remains unwritten. Lauren took years from my life, damaged relationships, and caused immense pain, but she also taught me resilience, the importance of documentation, and the power of patient truth-telling. The investigation continues, slowly but thoroughly. Various agencies are building cases, comparing notes, and following the money trail. Lauren's freedom may not last much longer, but even if legal consequences never materialize, she's already lost what mattered most to her, the ability to play victim convincingly. My story isn't unique. Many families have their own Laurens, master manipulators who weaponize sympathy and exploit systems meant to help. The details vary, but the patterns remain consistent. Escalating lies, desperate measures to maintain control, and eventual collapse when reality intrudes. What makes the difference is documentation, patience, and refusing to be silenced. Lauren counted on my isolation, my inability to prove the truth against her compelling performances. She didn't count on James, on hidden cameras, on her own hubris leaving a digital trail. The morning sun streams through my new apartment windows as I finish writing this update. Somewhere across town, Lauren is probably crafting her next scheme, her next identity, her next attempt at control. But I'm no longer her target audience. That power is gone, dissolved by truth and time and her own overreach. I found myself staring at Lauren's latest social media post while sitting in James's kitchen. She'd posted a photo of herself at a wellness retreat, claiming claiming the trauma of family betrayal had triggered genuine neurological symptoms. The comment section was filled with supportive messages from strangers who didn't know her history. James walked in carrying groceries, his daughter trailing behind with her school backpack. She gave me a shy wave before heading to her room to start homework. The normalcy of the moment felt surreal after months of chaos. My phone vibrated with a text from Dad. He'd managed to freeze the remaining accounts before Lauren could drain them completely. The bank required both signatures for any major transactions now, effectively neutralizing the power of attorney for anything beyond basic medical decisions. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for the first time since discovering the financial devastation. Mom answered the door, her face showing the strain of recent revelations. She led me to the kitchen where Dad sat with stacks of paperwork, methodically documenting every fraudulent transaction. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken questions. I helped them organize receipts, create timelines, and compile evidence for their attorney. Mom's hands trembled as she showed me credit card statements revealing Lauren's shopping sprees during times she'd claimed to be incapacitated. James called with an update from the support group. Several members had come forward with their own suspicions about Lauren's behavior. One man had noticed her driving herself to meetings despite claiming she couldn't hold a license due to seizure risk. Another had seen her at a concert during a supposed hospitalization. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Lauren had applied for disability benefits, listing me as her primary caregiver on the forms. The audacity was breathtaking. She needed my signature to complete the application, clearly hoping I'd comply to avoid further conflict. I met with the Disability Services representative, bringing our evidence binder. The woman listened carefully as I explained the situation, showing her the EEG results, the practice videos Mom had found, and the timeline of Lauren's contradictory claims. She made copies of everything, her expression growing more serious with each document. Lauren's response was swift. She filed a complaint with the medical board against James's supervisor, claiming the entire neurology department was conspiring against disabled patients. The complaint was so outlandish that it actually helped our case, showing a pattern of escalating false accusations. Dad discovered more financial damage while reviewing old statements. Lauren had been siphoning money for years through small, seemingly innocent transactions. A grocery trip here, a medical expense there, always with a plausible explanation. The total approached $75,000 over 5 years. I spent my lunch breaks at the courthouse, filing paperwork to help my parents reclaim some control over their finances. The legal aid attorney explained that while criminal charges were possible, the family relationship complicated everything. Lauren had been careful to keep individual thefts under felony thresholds. James's ex-wife reached out unexpectedly. She'd realized how Lauren had manipulated her during the custody dispute and wanted to apologize. She offered to provide a statement about Lauren's harassment tactics if needed. James was cautious but appreciated the gesture. The storage facility manager called with interesting news. He'd found some items Lauren had left behind in her haste to clear the unit. Among them was a notebook detailing her schemes, complete with income projections and target lists. He'd already contacted the authorities about it. Mom started attending a support group for family members of people with personality disorders. She came home from her first meeting with red eyes but seemed lighter somehow. She'd met others who'd been manipulated by family members and realized she wasn't alone in her confusion and guilt. Lauren tried a new tactic, showing up at my workplace during lunch hour. Security intercepted her at the lobby after she began loudly proclaiming that I'd stolen her medication. My boss watched the security footage later, shaking his head at her performance. He assured me that my job was secure. The journalist contacted me directly, having pieced together the full story through public records and interviews. She was planning a series on disability fraud and its impact on legitimate patients. I provided background information but declined to be quoted, wanting to move forward rather than dwelling on the past. Dad made progress with the bank, successfully contesting several fraudulent charges. The credit card companies were less helpful, but he managed to close all joint accounts and protect what remained of their retirement savings. It wasn't much, but it was something. James's daughter had her quarterly neurology appointment. Her doctor mentioned that funding for pediatric epilepsy research had been impacted by increased fraud investigations. Real patients were suffering because resources were being diverted to verify legitimate cases. The ripple effects of Lauren's actions extended far beyond our family. I received a letter from Lauren's lawyer threatening defamation charges if I continued spreading lies about her condition. The letter was so poorly written and full of legal errors that my attorney actually laughed. He filed it away as further evidence of harassment. Mom found more evidence while cleaning out Lauren's old room. Hidden in a jewelry box were business cards from attorneys specializing in disability lawsuits, dating back 8 years. There were also printouts from online forums discussing how to fake various conditions convincingly. The police detective called with an update. While reviewing Lauren's complaint about hacked accounts, they discovered she'd been using multiple fake social media profiles to harass people who'd questioned her disability. The way Lauren's schemes keep unraveling through such tiny details is incredible. Who knew a storage unit manager would find a notebook with actual income projections from her fake disability plans? Digital forensics had traced them all back to her devices. Lauren's desperation peaked when she attempted to file for a restraining order against me, claiming I was stalking her. The judge reviewed her application, noted the lack of evidence, and dismissed it immediately. The court clerk mentioned it was the third such attempt Lauren had made against different people that month. Dad's attorney successfully challenged the power of attorney in court. The judge ruled that it had been obtained under false pretenses and revoked it entirely. Lauren's reaction was to post a tearful video about elder abuse, but by then, her audience had dwindled to a handful of enablers. The Disability Services investigation concluded with a formal finding of fraud. Lauren was banned from applying for benefits for 5 years and flagged in the system. The investigator thanked me for the thorough documentation, saying it was one of the clearest cases they'd seen. James received recognition at work for his ethical handling handling of sensitive equipment. His supervisor used the situation as a teaching moment about proper documentation and professional boundaries. The false accusations had inadvertently highlighted James's integrity. Mom and Dad began couples counseling to work through the betrayal and financial stress. Their therapist specialized in family fraud cases and helped them understand how Lauren had exploited their parental instincts. The healing process was slow but steady. I returned to my normal routine, going to work, paying bills, and rebuilding friendships Lauren had tried to destroy. Sarah reached out after hearing about the disability fraud finding, apologizing for cutting contact. We met for coffee, and while things weren't the same, it was a start. The journalist article series launched with careful attention to protecting real patients while exposing fraud tactics. Lauren wasn't named, but anyone familiar with the situation recognized the patterns. The series sparked important conversations about verification processes and support systems. Lauren made one final attempt at manipulation, sending a sewer slide threat to multiple family members. We'd learned our lesson and immediately contacted emergency services for a welfare check. She was furious when police arrived, but couldn't claim we'd ignored a cry for help. Dad calculated the final financial damage, approximately $47,000 in direct theft, plus thousands more in legal fees, credit damage, and lost opportunities. It was devastating, but not insurmountable. They'd have to work a few extra years before retiring, but they'd survive. The extended family slowly learned the truth as Lauren's stories unraveled. My aunt called to apologize for believing Lauren's lies about me. My cousin refriended me on social media with a sheepish message about jumping to conclusions. The family dynamic would never be the same, but at least the truth was known. James and I maintained our friendship, bonded by the bizarre experience we'd shared. His daughter continued thriving with proper medical support, and he'd become an advocate for epilepsy awareness in his community. He often spoke about the importance of verification without stigmatizing real patients. Mom discovered Lauren had been intercepting mail meant for them, redirecting bills and statements to hide her theft. The post office investigation revealed Lauren had forged documents to authorize the mail forwarding. It was another charge to add to the growing list. 6 months after the journalist's article, Lauren quietly left town. She'd found a new city where no one knew her history, probably planning to start the cycle again. But this time, there was a digital trail, investigation records, and people who knew her tactics. I kept the evidence binders in storage, hoping never to need them again, but knowing Lauren's patterns too well. She'd resurface eventually, with a new story and new victims. But for now, we had peace. My parents slowly rebuilt their financial security through careful budgeting and part-time work. Mom sold jewelry, and Dad took on consulting projects. They downsized their house, using the equity to pay off the debts Lauren had created. It wasn't the retirement they'd planned, but they faced it together. The support group implemented new verification procedures, requiring medical documentation for membership. It was a delicate balance between protecting privacy and preventing fraud. They named the new policy after the woman whose son had died, honoring real patients while guarding against deception. I returned to graduate school, finally able to use my transcripts after the hold was lifted. My thesis advisor was understanding about the delays. Having read about the disability fraud issue in the journalist series, I focused on my studies, determined to build the future Lauren had tried to steal. James's ex-wife became an unexpected ally, warning others in their community about Lauren's tactics. She'd experienced firsthand how convincing a manipulator could be and wanted to prevent others from being weaponized against innocent people. The final legal proceedings wrapped up quietly. Lauren faced no criminal charges, the prosecutor deciding the evidence was too circumstantial despite the clear pattern, but she was on the radar now, flagged in multiple systems, her ability to exploit others significantly reduced. I moved into a new apartment closer to campus, a fresh start in a space Lauren had never touched. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but it was mine. No eviction notices, no threatening letters, no chaos. Just quiet mornings and the freedom to build my life without constant sabotage. Mom and Dad found their rhythm again. Saturday morning coffee and Sunday dinners. Their marriage tested but ultimately strengthened. They'd learned hard lessons about trust and verification, about loving someone without enabling them. They still loved Lauren, but from a careful distance now. The truth had set us free, not in some dramatic moment, but through patient documentation and quiet persistence. Lauren's elaborate fiction had collapsed under its own weight, leaving us to rebuild in its aftermath. We were scarred but surviving, wiser but still capable of trust. My story ended not with victory, but with peace. Lauren was gone, the immediate danger passed, but the lessons remained. I kept detailed records now, trusted but verified, and recognized manipulation tactics before they could take root. These skills served me well in work and relationships. Life returned to blessed normalcy. Work deadlines, grocery shopping, weekend plans with friends who'd stuck by me, small joys that felt enormous after months of crisis. I could answer my phone without dread, check my mail without fear, and plan my future without Lauren's shadow looming over every decision. The family healing continued slowly. Holiday gatherings were smaller now, some relationships irreparably damaged by Lauren's lies, but those who remained were genuine, the bonds tested and proven real. We'd learned to value truth over comfortable fiction. I graduated with my master's degree on a sunny afternoon, my parents in the audience with proud smiles. James and his daughter were there too, our strange journey having forged an unbreakable friendship. Lauren's empty chair went unmentioned but not unnoticed. My new job came with fresh challenges and opportunities, a chance to use my skills without constantly defending my integrity. Colleagues knew nothing of the past drama, seeing only my qualifications and work ethic. It was liberating to be judged on my own merits. The evidence binders gathered dust in storage, a reminder of hard-won lessons. I hoped never to need them again, but kept them as insurance against Lauren's potential return. Some battles you win by being prepared never to fight them again. Peace felt different than I'd expected. Not a dramatic resolution, but a quiet return to ordinary life. Morning coffee tasted better without crisis looming. Simple conversations felt precious after after months of strategic planning. Normal was its own reward after chaos. Thanks for letting me wonder out loud with you. Definitely been a ride. No idea what's next, but I'll be here for it. Like the video, it helps more than you think. Catch you somewhere down the road.